the human soul is not easily overwhelmed and knows how to survive when we feel most lost. So the old idea is that everybody has a unique soul. Nature only makes originals. And so everyone who is born has a unique soul. That's the old idea. That's what tells us that we have to respect everybody, because everyone has an original capacity. And that's what we want to respect. That's the depth of diversity, is the uniqueness of the individual human soul. But we're here not just to awaken to our soul, which is a great idea, but also to make more soul in the world. And one way you know that the world needs soul is when the world gets polarized, and when there's lots of conflicts and there is no center and no shared sense of unity. What's missing is soul. Soul is the connective tissue of life. And when soul goes missing, everything divides and the world can turn against itself. And you could say that the great uncertainty with which we now live is part of that sad process of the world turning against itself. Soul, which is what makes each of us unique, is also the energy that connects us all together. And that if we're going to change the world, if we're going to heal things, if we're going to find unity again, if we're going to create genuine, humane society, which is inclusive and respectful, we're going to have to make more soul. So, to be alive at this time means to be present as many familiar patterns simply dissolve. There's a lack of consensus when it comes to science, an increase of polarization when it comes to almost any issue that arises, and a loss of trust in social institutions. The changes are happening so fast that the institutions that were created to protect us cannot keep up with what's going on. And as things cycle faster and faster, one major crisis quickly replaces another, so that people's fear of change intensifies, and both collective and personal levels of uncertainties grow day by day. It turns out that the fear of uncertainty, in other words, people become afraid of uncertainty. This is happening, especially just recently. That makes us surprisingly deeply vulnerable. Uncertainty turns out to be a powerful thing that can make us feel very vulnerable and more susceptible to intense levels of anxiety. And that's one reason I think why we're addressing it tonight. At the same time, uncertainty permeates the world. Uncertainty is not something that can be dismissed or be suspended or avoided. It actually makes its appearance in all kinds of things, including cosmology. Cosmology is the stories that people make up about the world. Cosmology is like, humans are the only cosmologists so far, the only ones thinking about how this whole cosmos may have come to be and what is it that sustains it. And so at the same time that uncertainty is permeating our daily lives and our individual psyches, it also makes an appearance at the level of cosmology, because modern scientists who for many years had a consensus that the universe was expanding at an accelerating rate, now are not so certain. They used to think that if nothing changed some billions of years from now, the universe would presumably become more separated, everything from each other, in this rapid expansion or acceleration of expansion that they were studying. And then presumably everything would become distant and cold and dark and inhospitable. However, recent studies reveal that what scientists call dark energy is acting in ways that they did not anticipate. And the report that they put out starts out with this statement: the fate of the universe is still very much up in the air. In other words, their entire theory of the universe has now been thrown into uncertainty. And what I'm trying to point out is that this issue that we're dealing with, uncertainty at so many levels of life, actually extends into the cosmos or into people's current theories about the cosmos. And so the new data suggest that the process of cosmic and acceleration has actually been weakening for 4 or 5 million years. Their data was incorrect. What they thought was endless expansion actually has been weakening for millions of years already. And so dark energy, which they now think is at the center of everything, turns out to not be a cosmological constant, but rather it is changeable just like everything else in the cosmos. And they end the report by saying, we cannot foretell what dark energy will do in the future, so that the future of the cosmos is uncertain. So I'm not just trying to make the uncertainty worse. I'm trying to give it a place. I'm trying to look at where it exists in the very big things like the cosmos, and how we might imagine it differently so that it isn't simply something that is like persecuting us. So it turns out that in times of radical change, uncertainty that has been there all along gets revealed. That's another way of looking at it. And so we see it in this study of the cosmos. And of course, they're worried now that since it's the cosmos has not been simply, getting bigger and bigger as they thought. Now they're worried that it's going to contract and in that way disappear. But I think it doesn't take that much kind of imagination to realize that probably what happens is the cosmos expands and then it contracts. Because you could say the cosmos breathes. Nature breathes. You could say that when we're breathing in the entire cosmos, and when we're exhaling, we're releasing the cosmos. This whole thing is alive. It's all breathing. And I think they'll eventually get to that realization. Nature literally breathes, the trees and everything breathe, and we take in the oxygen they produce and so on. But I'm trying to provide a sense of relocating ourselves in the cosmos and in the world, because part of the uncertainty has been caused by the dislocation of the human soul that used to be considered part of the soul of the world and now is considered to be isolated and separate and unmoored and also accidental. So in a way, you could say that current ways that we view the world are part of what's blocking us finding the kind of imagination and ideas that could help us find a way through all the confusion, tragedy, uncertainty. And one of the ideas that is an ancient idea, but I find it valuable now, is that the world is not a finished place. Creation didn't happen back then, and we're in the aftermath. The world is unfinished, and creation is happening all the time. And the same is true of our lives. For our souls are here to transform and are always on the verge of awakening in both small and big ways, that not only connect us to the pulse of life, for instance, the heart of nature, but also make us potential assistants or agents that can help creation to continue. And this old idea about creation being ongoing is a bigger idea than the idea that the world might end. So maybe just to put a cap on it, the world becomes flooded with uncertainty and anxiety, and a greater psychological, spiritual, and cosmological understanding is needed in order not to be overwhelmed, in order not to be numbed or swallowed by the circumstances. And in this old understanding, the world, with all its conflicts, uncertainties, and insecurities, is also the place of redemption and renewal. And the soul, being connected to the soul of the world, is also our individual connection to the energies of redemption, you could call it. Not that big redemption that people said comes at the end, but the little redemptions that we could get now. But also there's a opportunity through the awakening of the soul to have a personal connection to the energies of renewal. We're not supposed to be the same person at the end of our life as we were coming in. We are supposed to be, with any kind of luck and grace, kind of like a revelation of the core energies and imagination that we brought into the world when we came in. So, back to the uncertainty. Entering the modern world at this time of global crises of all kinds can be like stepping into a rite of passage that's underway. And the reason I mention rite of passage is because the middle of a rite of passage, which is usually called liminality, one of its chief characteristics is uncertainty. A rite of passage has three parts to it. The beginning is a separation. The person winds up all alone at night. There's a separation that occurs. It happens all repeatedly in a person's life. When separation happens, the soul thinks we're on one of those journeys of awakening. And if the first step is being separate from other things, the second step is the step that puts us into ordeals and questions and uncertainty. And the old term for that is liminality, which means to be between one thing and another. And so that liminality would mean the betwixt and between, in which one state or phase of life transitions into another stage or phase of life. And you could say that's what's happening collectively. The world that we knew is gone. The world that we're headed for hasn't arrived yet. And we are in that betwixt and between liminal state. And that is part of the cause of the intensification of uncertainty, because in that kind of uncertainty is where the actual revelation of what's trying to happen occurs. The in-between, the betwixt and between, is where we don't know what's going to happen next, but we are actually closer to what's trying to happen. So that's the old way of understanding, rites of passage, and especially that central part, the liminality. And that's the part where we already are, collectively and therefore also personally.